Welcome to Talk of the Nation, Week 13, brought to you by Intermountain Healthcare. I'm JT, and we're on location here at the beautiful Allegiant Stadium at the Coors Light Landing. The Silver and Black are back on the East Coast again, looking to snap a two-game losing streak as they take on the winless Jets. Coming up on the show, we have the great Justin Tuck and famed sports broadcaster Chris Rose. But first, I'm joined by Jason Fitz of ESPN and ESPN Radio. Jason, so good to see you again. And the Raiders got to put last week behind them. What do you think's the biggest reason why the Raiders will bounce back against the Jets?
That's a great question. And look, part of this comes back to the youth of this roster. I mean, this is an incredibly young team across the board for the most part. This is that opportunity to sort of just forget and move forward. The coaching staff has been remarkable this year. And I think, it's easy to look at last week and say, hey, this team got their butts kicked, and take nothing away from that. But the fact is that John Gruden and Tom Cable have particularly been able to do great jobs with this offense. That didn't show last week. I have a hard time believing that we'll see that for a second week. This comes down to staying in the right down and distance. JT, you know that. And realistically, this is a team last week that between penalties and between negative plays put themselves in a bad situation. We haven't seen that all year. I have no reason to think we'll see that against a Jets team that is not talented. I mean, the Falcons, at least on paper, are a good team. The Jets can say none of that. So they have a matchup advantage. I fully expect for Gruden to be able to take advantage of that offensively, particularly. I think the Raiders bounce back. They bounce back in a big way. Well,
the Raiders still control their own fate. They have games still against the Colts, Chargers, Dolphins, and Broncos. Do you feel like they have to win 4 out of 5 or almost run the table to get into the postseason?
I don't think they have to run the table, but 4 out of 5 I think is pretty realistic. But that's also part of why, JT, I've been saying on national all week that, anybody that's hot taking that the Raiders are now out of the playoffs, it just isn't paying attention. Because if you look at the schedule, the Raiders do control their own destiny, and they have the tiebreaker against Cleveland. That's significant because when you look at the Browns' upcoming schedule, they have the Titans, the Ravens, the Steelers. They also have a Giants team that is far better than their record. So I see at least 3 more potential losses on the schedule for the Browns. So the Raiders go in, take care of business. They will control their own destiny because of tiebreakers, and I still think it's a playoff team, 100%.
We both talk about this often on the radio. The schedule is wild. Teams you think you're going to beat come up and bite you, and then there are other games where teams are causing upsets. So I think the schedule here in the month of December around the AFC is going to be wild. I'm sensing a bunch of upsets.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I think it's become a lot like the NBA because we talk so much about how the NBA is a matchup league, right? And so sometimes you just don't match up with the team well, even if it's in the playoffs. You got the higher seed. The reason we see upsets sometimes is just matchup problems. So you look across the board, and the Browns have matchup issues. I'll go back to them. Even the Steelers at undefeated haven't looked great. They have matchup issues with some of these teams. So it is going to be absolute havoc. And also, let's just acknowledge the fact that as a culture in sports media, we fall in love with every quarterback that plays a few good games. And Justin Herbert has looked great. I'll take nothing against that. Tua Tagovailoa has had great moments, but they're also young quarterbacks. We have no idea what to expect from them down the stretch. So the Dolphins look like they have some beatable moments coming ahead to me also.
Pro Bowl voting opened up at Raiders.com/Pro Bowl. Why don't you give me an under-the-radar Raider that you think has a chance of getting your vote?
That's a great question. I'm going to go with the offensive line in general on this because I think this offensive line has been absolutely spectacular, and I still have it in my head. I was doing a draft show with Mina Kimes and Mike Golick Jr. and Field Yates the year that Colton Miller was selected. And, Junior, being an offensive lineman, award voter in college football, studies these guys so much. And he laughed on air and said, man, you did not get the guy you want in Colton Miller. And I look at Colton now, and it's like he's proven a lot of people wrong. So part of that, again, great job by the coaching staff. But you could make a case for any of the offensive linemen, and I wouldn't have a problem with it. I know Good isn't going to get any Pro Bowl votes or consideration, but I think somebody like that should, considering the number of different positions he's been asked to play. So I'm looking at that side of the line, particularly saying, hey, everybody pays attention to Rodney and Gabe, but I think the other guys on the line deserve a lot of credit.
Now, we both have something in common. We came from sports fan. Now look at us. Look at this place. Look at where we are today. We're living the dream. We both have that in common. Tell us about your journey and where you're at today.
It's funny you mentioned that, JT, because I've been listening to you for years, and I always look back, for anybody that doesn't know, I was touring in music and had some success. In our busiest year, I was out with a country band called the Band Perry, and our busiest year, I was gone 300 days, and I came home to my wife in December, and I said, look, I'm honored to do what I do, but I don't love it. And my wife said, if I asked 100 of your friends what you really love, what would the answer be? And I said, sports, without hesitation. And she said, great, find a way to talk about sports. And for me, when I was a little kid as a violinist growing up in Vegas, actually, the funny thing is, by the time I was 8, I was practicing 8 hours a day. I got into Juilliard when I was 10. My one rule when I was a kid was no practice on Sundays, because my dad wanted to watch a Raiders game and didn't want to listen to a violin in the background while it happened. So my dad and I would sit down, eat a dozen donuts together, and watch the Raiders. That's been my whole life. Like, I do what I do today because of my fandom for the Raiders. I started a podcast and I did it in my car because I felt like an idiot and didn't know if anybody would listen to it. And I grew that thing and I grassroots that thing, and I got myself to the point where luckily important people took note of it. So, my life changed because of my fandom for the Raiders. So it's crazy, but that's the one thing that I think makes it unique. And you know this as well as anybody, but like, when you start talking to fans, but you haven't lost the fan mentality, I think people get that. It feels more real and it connects better. So I never hide my fandom, because I think it's an important part of why I can relate to every fan base every year. We've all been through good years. We've been through bad years. We know the pain and angst of it. I'm not jaded to it. I want to embrace that emotion, and that's what I think makes it different.
Thanks, Jason. Keep doing what you're doing. Your career is taking off. Coming up next, one of the busiest men in all of media, Chris Rose, joins us from NFL Network on Talk of the Nation.
This has been brought to you by Allegiant, the official airline of the Las Vegas Raiders. Low fares, nonstop flights. Book now, only at Allegiant.com. Cox, proud partner of the Las Vegas Raiders. Intermountain Healthcare, helping people live the healthiest lives possible. Presented by San Manuel Casino, official Southern California casino of Allegiant Stadium.
Welcome back to Talk of the Nation. Chris Rose joins us from NFL Network. And Chris, so great to see you. You're one of the busiest guys in all of sports. And how's it been for you covering sports during the pandemic?
Well, it's interesting because I also work for MLB Network. I do a daily show called Intentional Talk with Kevin Millar, the old Red Sox. And we've actually been doing that for a decade, each out of our own homes. So while people were, and our business was making adjustments during the pandemic and trying to light up their home and make their place look like studios, we were like, where you been? We've been doing this for 10 years. So we were kind of ahead of the curve when it came to that. But as far as the NFL goes, fortunately, I was let back in the building at the kickoff of the season. But it's been really different in terms of, usually on Sundays, we would watch all the games together in a big theater. It's like probably 20 or 25 seats, and every one of the seats would be filled with somebody who's on the air or a producer or a researcher or whatever. Well, they've cut that down to about 4 of us now. So it's just 4 of us yelling and screaming in a single room and trying to get you ready to bring you game day highlights at 4:30 Pacific, and then game day final right after the Sunday night game. So from that standpoint, it's been different. But, I don't go to the games during the regular season because I'm in studios on Sundays. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to cover the Super Bowl. I think the people that paid much more than I do at the network are still trying to figure that one out. But there's been massive adjustments. And in terms of watching the games, I will say this. I still watch the product, and do I miss seeing the fans? Yes. Does it make me change the way I feel about football? No, it doesn't.
Now, you're a Browns fan, and your team's fighting for a playoff spot. The Raiders got the Browns early in that snow game. It was a big win for the Silver and Black, but the Raiders are now chasing the Browns. Talk about the AFC, the wild card in that race with your team in Cleveland.
Well, it's interesting. So let's start with the Browns, because it's very rare that we're now in the beginning of December and we're not talking about who they should draft in the top 5. So this is a good feeling for us. 8-3, best 11 game start since '94 when Belichick was on the sidelines, which coincidentally was also the last year they won a playoff game. So Stefanski's been great. They've basically won every game they should have. When you're a football fan, you're always like, oh, we should have won that one. No, we butts kicked week 1 in Baltimore, butts kicked in Pittsburgh, and the Raiders played better in a crappy weather game. So that's going to be one if it's head-to-head at the end of the season and the Raiders have that one in their checkmark column and the Browns don't, it's going to hurt. With all that being said, as far as the Raiders go, they looked so good in that Sunday night loss to Kansas City. And I know it's professional football. It's not junior varsity football where you pat them on the head and tell them, hey, you guys did a great job. but I really thought they made significant strides in their 2 games against Kansas City. And then for them to come out and have that disaster against the Falcons was horrible. So I put myself in the shoes of a Raiders fan right now. I'm pissed off. We are where we are. But I look at the rest of the schedule and I say, yeah, it's pretty doable. Like they do play the Dolphins over the last 5 weeks, don't they? Like the second to last game or something?
They do. They have a schedule coming up that's favorable, and Raiders got to feel like they almost have to run the table. One more thing on the Browns. You were a young boy back in 1981. What comes to mind when I say Red Right 88?
Really, JT? We're doing this to me? I'll tell you a funny story. So 2 of them. My family had season tickets from the Browns ever since their inception in 1946. And so, I started going to the games when I was probably 6 or 7, and I was just about to turn 10 in 1981. And I got grounded. I wasn't allowed to go to the game. I took you remember the little toys, the Playmobiles, the things that like bent at the waist? You remember those?
Yeah.
JT, don't you? Okay. For some reason, I was a demonic kid, and I took a bunch of them and I flushed them down the toilet. So my parents had to call a plumber, and I blew up the entire plumbing system in the house. And they were like, "You're an idiot. You're sitting home." I was like, "But wait, the Browns made the playoffs for the first time. I can't go to the game." And so anyway, we were watching the game, and it was like, 98 below. And my mom looked at me and she's like, "God, you played this great. The week you get punished, it's too cold to be outside." And I was like, "But I still want to be there." I watched the game, and I thought that Cockcroft was going to come out and kick the field goal. He had had a terrible day, and they ended up throwing the ball for Newsome, and Mike Davis picked it off. So fast forward to 1995, I had my first full-time on-air job in Reno, Nevada, which was considered Raider territory. They love their Bay Area sports up there. And I go to cover an event, and who's the keynote speaker? Mike Davis.
Wow.
So I went up to him and I said, "Hi, Mr. Davis. My name's Chris Rose. You broke my heart when I was a kid." He goes, "Oh, you must be from Cleveland, Ohio." He could not, by the way, he could not have been a nicer gentleman. He was like, "Listen, I was shocked that Brian Sipe threw that ball. I thought there was no way he was ever going to throw it." And it broke my heart, but that story stuck with me through the years.
Finally, Chris, all eyes in Raider Nation are on the AFC playoffs, as we talked about. Give us your biggest NFL storyline that you've been watching besides COVID.
Well, I would say the biggest storyline is that Patrick Mahomes, in my opinion, is already a top 8 quarterback in the history of the sport. And if by the time he is done, as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be a top 2 or 3. And if he's number 1, it wouldn't shock me. And I know Raider Nation hates to hear that because you're going to have to go against him in the next 15 years. But kudos to you guys. You have given him some problems this year. With that being said, I'd love to be the guy who has problems when he's scoring 30 points a game against a team that's kind of figured him out. I think he is so good and so special that I hope people don't get tired of his brilliance the way that we tend to want to move on to the next big thing.
Chris, so great seeing you. We hope to see you out here in Vegas soon. Coming up next on Talk of the Nation, Super Bowl champion Justin Tuck joins us.
Brought to you by Modelo, setting the gold standard for authentic Mexican beer since 1925. Modelo, brewed for those with a fighting spirit.
Welcome back to Talk of the Nation. We welcome in one of the best defensive players of his era. Justin Tuck joins us. And Justin, you played a short time for the Silver and Black, but I want to get into it because you were a big part in trying to change the culture of the franchise back then.
Yeah, I think, coming from the Giants and being able to, see, Super Bowl teams and play with great players and getting the opportunity to come out to the, Oakland Raiders, that storied history, that was something that really appealed to me. And, getting to work with, Charles Woodson and people like that, man, I knew it was something that I wanted to be a part of and wanted to be a part of it in a way that hopefully would bring, Raider Nation, a winning franchise again.
Now, you know, Mike Mayock and John Gruden are trying to turn around this young defense, promising players such as Cleveland Ferrell, Maxx Crosby, Jonathan Abram. What do you think of the young Raiders as they're trying to get going in this league?
Yeah, it's a lot of promise there. I definitely love what I see from Maxx and Ferrell up front. You know, obviously, I think Maxx, in a lot of ways, hit the ground running last year, and it wasn't expected. You know, everyone knew he was talented, but I don't think anyone expected him to have the year that he had, and they didn't follow it up this year as well. So it's definitely a lot of talent there, a lot of young talent there they can build on, and I think Gruden and Mayock is gonna be able to add pieces over time and build this thing the right way through the draft and just add some smart pieces through free agency over time. But like, I'm very excited what I've seen from that that young defensive front. And you talk about Abram in the backfield, it just seems like he has the makings of some of the greats that you've seen, patrol that secondary. And he seems like he has a lot of that making. So hopefully he'll continue, progress and strive forward. And like I said, they have a great, foundation and nucleus as a young front there.
Well, you were a great player, and you played with so many legendary players throughout your career. What was it about Charles Woodson that made him so special, and while he'll probably be a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Charles was just the consummate pro, first of all, but you add, he had the talent to do it all. He was great in coverage. He was great man-to-man. He was great blitzing. He was a phenomenal tackler. He played so smart. He didn't make mistakes. And as he got older, you could tell, he wasn't, the Charles Woodson of his early years, but he was so in tune with the game that he didn't have to be. He was a step ahead of everything. And just being around him and watching how he prepared, how he focused, I came there in my 9th year. I felt like I knew everything it was about getting my body and my mind prepared for a season or for a game. And I learned a lot from Charles. I still talk to Charles to this day, and like you said, he definitely, if he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, I don't even know what a first ballot Hall of Famer looks like. The guy was just a playmaker. Every time we needed a play, every time we needed something big, he was always up for it, and he came up big for us. And he did that his entire career.
In your time in Oakland, I remember when you came out of the tunnel, you'd lock in with the fans from the black hole. You were really engaged at that time. You still, even though a Super Bowl champion, had a lot to prove, and those years meant something to you. Talk about your years playing there in front of that great fan base.
Yeah, I'm just disappointed that in my tenure there, we didn't completely turn it around. I think we started the foundation of turning it around, and especially having some of the young nucleus we had, and Khalil Mack and Carr and others, man. So I think, I'm disappointed in the fact that when I went out there, I had a sole goal focused around bringing back the Raiders, right? And that crowd never let us down, even though we, especially the first year there, we didn't have the season that we wanted to have, but every home game was loud, packed, and they were there to the end. And I found so much respect for that fan base when I was there. They embraced me, even though I was an outsider coming from New York. They embraced me. They embraced my family, and to this day, they still treat me like I was a guy who played for 15 years for the Raiders. So there's definitely a special place in my heart for Oakland, and that will never change.
Tell us what you've been doing post-career. I know you're helping players figure out their life after football. How's that been?
Yeah, I'm a vice president now at Goldman Sachs. I manage money for high net worth individuals, and a separate part of my business is creating education and guidance for a lot of our players in all leagues. But obviously, I'm super focused on the NFL, the NFLPA, and some of the things that we're trying to do there. And day to day, man, I'm looking at markets and trying to make sound, educated financial decisions for our clients.
Finally, the legacy brick at Allegiant Stadium. It's perfect for your office, too. Tell me about that. Once a Raider, always a Raider.
Yeah, that thing, this is special to me because, when I think about all the greats, all the Raiders that have come before me and will come after me, and just think about the names and the legacy, and being a part of that, even though it was a small small part of it. Just being a part of it is special. And I applaud them for doing stuff like this because it keeps us engaged. It keeps us feeling like we had some small, level of their success. So, I definitely keep this around me in my office here. And I know other people who've got it as well. And it's something that's definitely special to us. So, it's apparent that it's a brick too. It's pretty heavy too. So, I think just being mentioned in that greatness is something you never take for granted.
Thanks so much for doing this, Justin. You had a heck of a career. We thank you for joining us. Coming up next, my final thoughts as the Raiders get set to take on the Jets on Talk of the Nation.
Coors Light, an official beer of Raider Nation, made to chill.
As we wrap things up today, the Raiders continued their commitment to excellence on and off the field this week when they introduced a new grant program to help local nonprofit organizations throughout the state of Nevada. Go to Raiders.com for more details. Now, I know all of the Raider Nation wants to talk about the playoffs, but it's one game at a time. Just take care of business in New Jersey. Don't worry about what the other teams are doing in the AFC. Just beat the team in front of you. Finish the season strong, and the rest will all take care of itself. For everyone at Silver and Black Productions, I'm JT. Thanks for joining us. Next week, we'll get you ready for the Indianapolis Colts on Talk of the Nation.
This has been brought to you by Allegiant, the official airline of the Las Vegas Raiders. Low fares, nonstop flights. Book now, only at Allegiant.com. Intermountain Healthcare, helping people live the healthiest lives possible. Brought to you by Credit One Bank, the official credit card of the Raiders. Cox, proud partner of the Las Vegas Raiders.